As a developer, you're probably going to find yourself in the role of teaching somebody something at some point, and perhaps teaching multiple people in kind of a classroom scenario. And you're going to find that that's not an easy thing to do. It's not a natural thing to do for everyone. And that's what we're talking about in today's episode of Developer Tea with Will Riley. This is another interview from the Squares Conference. My name is Jonathan Cottrell. You're listening to Developer Tea. My goal on this show is to help you become a better developer. I do that by giving you kind of this virtual coaching experience, but also just learning with you, finding things that are interesting and that multiple developers are going through, that other developers are struggling with. That's why we take questions from listeners and try to answer them in reasonable ways and have these kinds of conversations with experienced developers working in companies like Will works at. Will works at Flywheel. You probably have heard of Flywheel Local. Flywheel is a WordPress hosting service, and Will works as a front-end engineer at Flywheel. So I'm really excited to talk to Will on this show, and I'm excited for him to share with you some of his experiences, and really thankful that Will took some time to sit down and talk with me at Squares. I'm going to get out of the way. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Developer Tea. I hope you enjoy my interview with Will Riley. I'm with Will Riley at Squares Conference. Will works at Flywheel. He also did a panel, or not a panel, a workshop. I've done this twice now. Will hosted a workshop here at Squares, and I asked if he wanted to come on Developer Tea. So thank you for joining the show, Will.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Really excited to talk to you about a few things. I was in the workshop that you did, the API workshop, as best practices of an API. Mm-hmm. And we had a good discussion afterwards, and I think that we can talk about some of that today, as well as some of the stuff that you do at Flywheel. And in fact, we also talked before your workshop about you were working on some design system things, and you were discussing that with another person. I don't know how much of this you can talk about publicly, but I know you're working on some of this stuff. So I'd love to talk to you. Let's start with that. What do you do? What is your kind of primary job at Flywheel?
So for me, I'm a front-end engineer. And so we've got a design team of 3 people. Andrea True, who's going to be talking at Circles next year. This year, rather. And then we've got Nick Ciccinelli, who's here with me, and he's working on some of our other product that we can't talk about. And then Adam Traybold, who's working on local and also the app. So
very cool.
They design stuff. I translate that to code. Sure. And so we're working on a little bit of design system stuff, basically exploring it, like poking and prodding, trying to figure out like what that means and how to make it work. Yeah. We just got out of a talk at Squares. Anne, I don't remember her last name. Anne Gudenhoser, I believe. I may be wrong. Anyways, her talk is amazing. She works at Project 202. It's funny because the booth is like right there. Yeah. So her talk was amazing, and it helps like kind of frame maybe? Stuff.
Is that correct? Grundhofter?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Cool. Yeah. So it helps frame stuff, you said?
It helps frame stuff because we're in the exploratory phase. Don't know what that really looks like. So trying to understand some of those things. Her talk, I really hope that it's available, like the slides and stuff. Yeah. But man,
it details some of that stuff.
It was great. It's really good.
This is a constant conversation, and I think a lot of the language around this is important, but it also becomes ambiguous depending on who you're talking to, right? So there's design systems, there's brand guidelines, there's design guidelines, there's
libraries,
pattern libraries. All of these things end up becoming a little bit fuzzy unless you decide for your organization to use one term for one thing.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I think that's super important. Another interview we did on Developer Tea was with Brad Frost. We talked about some of this stuff.
Yes, atomic design we use it and it helps. It really creates clarity in what things are responsible for what and at what spot. in the sort of
It's
stack.
one of those common things that we say all the time as developers is naming things. This is one of the hardest things that we do as developers, right?
Yeah.
We're basically creating, for lack of a better term, but words are variables that our mind attaches meaning to.
Yep.
And so we have these variables of pattern library. Well, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, and how can we make those variables like strong type? Because
That's good.
it would be
Yeah.
pretty nice.
Right.
The way that I learned to code was strong type. I like that
yeah.
sort of.
What language was that?
I learned Java, and
Okay,
then
yeah.
I learned .NET
Yep.
and Microsoft technologies.
Mm-hmm.
It just totally helped. I knew what was going to fall into what I expected to happen.
I think so often we do, if we're going to extend this metaphor, our minds kind of use like the Ruby type system, which is duck typing, right?
Yeah.
It kind of sounds right, and it seems to work as long as we use it, and I can talk to you about it. So I'm just going to assume that it's correct, right?
Yeah.
Rather than creating a very explicit definition for these things. And sometimes it's important to create that explicit definition. Maybe sometimes it's not. I think the important thing, though, or the most important part of it is understanding the difference, right? Like understanding that if we don't have definition for these things, what the possible negatives or negative outcomes could be as a result of that, right?
Yeah. I really want to set out to, like, at Flywheel, we have a design system, and we have common ways of using our pieces of UI. Challenges that it's tough to test those things right now, that the way that it's executed. So we're exploring that. Like, how do we make it more encapsulated, reusable, so that one of the key things that Anne said was make it so that, for example, one department isn't redoing the same thing, like redoing buttons.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
let's share our code. It makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Something that I remember Brad said on that episode, I'm going to keep going back to that because something he said that was so valuable, I think, was allowing ourselves to get away from the idea that redoing these things is somehow inherently valuable, right? So the concept being, even though it may feel good to write solid CSS, right, or whatever you're writing, even though it may feel good to do that over and over because you know how to do it and it's very fluent, right? So you find yourself in a state of kind of like a flow state because it's still is challenging enough that it engages your mind, but you're fluent with it, so you don't have to do a lot of new research for it, right? That gives us this illusion of value that may or may not actually even be there, right? So if we can capture that value once and replicate that value without investing the time necessary to redo the same things, retrace the same steps that we've traced in the past, I think some of it is a fear that we won't find something new and valuable to do, or that somehow, that unique value that we provided that first time, we can't, translate that into a new objective. Right?
Yeah, and you kind of sink your time into something where, like, the designers know the brand. They at Flywheel, how do we say it? Live, eat. Live, eat, and shit the brand. So what that means is, like, you know it to your core.
Right.
That also does mean that there's the eating part. That means that it can grow. Like, we're always hungry. So the designers understand when to start exploring with something maybe more complex or something else. Like, so how can we reduce the time to get to the spot that we can start that exploring? And there's there's a lot of work to do.
The thing that you showed me yesterday, I'm not sure exactly what tools you were using to build it. I know you said you're using Polymer and a few other things. But ultimately, the thing that I loved about it was the left side which I was paying really close attention to this because this is a very common thing that we have to do in the agency world as well.
Yeah.
To come up with, how do we determine what variability we need to document for a given component or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
So we have, the button. Let's take the button example. We talked about what things can change in a button, right? And you have those things in there. And then you had something like rules and a few other really interesting things.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about some of the things you have in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 3 general, this is my attempt at it. I don't know if it's right. I don't know what I'm doing. It's funny, I'm presenting this next week so that we can try to figure out, start to poke holes in this thing. And I think it's going to help a lot of people actually to hear this. And I would absolutely love to have any feedback. So if anyone agrees or disagrees, at me, I would love that on Twitter.
Sure.
So the way that we have it are, so properties properties, let's define that word, are all of our sites or apps or etc. products. Could be print even. Properties are like app.getflywheel.com, getflywheel.com, which is our marketing site. App.getflywheel.com is our dashboard for managing sites. And then we've got, for example, big one, local. It's a desktop app. Those 3 things are probably the most commonly understood properties. So they're great examples. They kind of they're designed and catered to different audiences, different personas.
Sure.
And so how do we capture the rules for those personas? Or the way, the term that I'm using right now, Jeff, who's another speaker, he introduced me to the word personas in design systems. And I was really interested in that. I was like, I think that there's something there. So today I'm playing with personas. So those variants or personas, they take advantage of systems. And we've got a lot of systems. And we list them. And I will get to the UI stuff. Systems are like accessibility and color and type. How does type respond and relate to other type when it's in a kind of collection of stuff? Brad Frost's molecules? And then how do we variate those that need to be when they need to be for different markets? Like marketing wants to be more friendly and open, and so it needs more space between the H1 and the H3, for example, like low level. And then how do we take those rules, get the reasons from the designers, because we want to understand what the validation is. We want to get some of that background knowledge. Okay, you're doing this for a good reason. Great. How can we get a list of all those rules and then apply them to the pieces of UI? And then lock it down to what the options are that you should be using. So for buttons, buttons is a great example, because on Flywheel we have primary button state. It's got plenty of padding, and you know that it's a call to action that is going to help you solve a problem or join something, maybe sign up for our affiliates program. There'll be a green button that says join. For secondary actions like create a new backup, we have a blue button inside of the app. And that blue button is just there are actions that don't maybe create large things, or I think the designers can define this a little better. But
easily undone actions.
I feel like that's It's secondary actions. I think that is a pretty, I think
comprehensive way of
Then
sense.
we have tertiary actions, which are outlines. They have their white. They've got we've got a gray border, circular, gray type, all cap, and same padding as the secondary buttons. So it's smaller, less padding, and those tertiary buttons, they're used on all throughout the app, and so we know that those patterns exist. We don't want to break them. So how can we say, for example, in the context of what I'm doing with Polymer, you can create your own HTML tags a lot like a React's kind of HTML tag situation that's happening where you capitalize the first letter, but this is an actual HTML tag that's created from an HTML tag primitive of the browser.
Yep.
So you can register an honest new HTML tag. I find that a lot more valuable because of reasons that I'll get to, but we are able to lock down what should happen. We can get those definitions from the designer, apply the rules, the systems to the pieces of UI, make sure that they fit all of the criteria, all the rules and reasons, and then we can come into the UI and say, check, that is correct. We can put numbers behind the implementation of the UI. And those numbers are, does it fit this rule? Great. Check. Good. Yeah. That's 100%.
Right. Yeah.
And then we put those on our properties. Hopefully we share that code so that we don't have to rewrite it. Then the designers can start to explore. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
It feels like it makes sense, but we're using different terminology.
Sure.
What we pretty much led with, like properties. I didn't hear that in Anne's talk. So is that valuable? Is it going to be confusing? Not sure. And then systems. Maybe there are some systems that we're not defining right. These are good questions. I don't know. But I'm working it through in my brain. Are variance personas? I don't know.
Right.
So there's something there. I think that could be pretty helpful.
Yeah, I think, it kind of depends on the team executing, right? So for example, in the agency world, we work with so many different brands that we almost have to apply this concept in separate iterations, right? Is there something that we as an agency, and I'm not asking you for an answer on this, but is there something that we as an agency can take advantage of at that meta scale, right?
Yeah.
Where, and maybe it's something like generating these things that we have to answer the questions. Something I think that's super interesting in what you're talking about is this discussion of rules, right? So the developers, quite often we receive, the average development shop is going to receive designs or design specifications that they need to follow. But I really love this idea of pairing with that the reason for the rule, right?
Yeah.
Which really is it's another way of talking about values, about, okay, we want the brand to be friendlier, right? And you could even continue that train of thought further up. Why do we want the brand to be friendlier? And so you ask that question, why, until you get to, maybe a piece of research, or maybe this is a brand value that we, this is part of the brand, right?
This really identifies with what we want to be like.
What we've chosen. Yeah. And whether there's data for that choice or not is sometimes irrelevant, right? It may just be that this is all right. This is really what we want.
Yeah, this makes us more whimsy. We just know it.
We just like that. We want to do it. And ultimately having those reasons allows you to be a more informed and intelligent developer and understand the execution of the design. And when you do encounter situations, because this will happen, every developer knows that this happens. You're going to encounter a situation where you're at the edge of some design system, where for some reason, some combination of these elements, or some combination of these things that
doesn't
have
jive.
These rules. Yeah, they have these rules wrapped up, but the reason is invalidated, right? The reason is broken, and so the driving purpose for the rule, it's kind of like parenting. I have rules. I will have rules for my children, and creating these rules for your children. It's like, okay, well, it's not the rule that matters. It's the principle that I'm trying to teach the child. And if the rule ever overrides the principle, then the rule becomes useless, right?
Yeah.
And so knowing that full chain of reasoning, I think, is extremely valuable. And I think more development shops, more agencies, and more companies like Flywheel adopting that full line of reasoning, this is one of the reasons why the designer developer combo person has always been viewed as so valuable, is because they can make these decisions that are not prescribed. They're dynamic decisions that rely on the full context.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
It is. It's a hard problem to solve. And I remember working at an agency, and I would want to be able to. Because there were only 3 designers, I could pick up on their patterns.
Yeah.
I understood what they were kind of intending to do, and I could reuse the things that they would reuse in their designs because it would help them. It was effective, and they wanted to make sure that people kept that sort of taught experience when they're like clicking buttons, for example, outline buttons or call to action, stuff like that. Very simple things. The idea of reusability in and encapsulated components, especially that React has been pushing, I just love. I want to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack, and I think every firm has the opportunity of defining this language for themselves. So it's a worthwhile exploration. I'm going to shift gears here. First of all, Flywheel bought everybody pizza here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Flywheel is not technically a sponsor of Developer Tea, but today they are because I'm going to eat pizza that they bought.
Buddy.
So it's super cool.
Happy to help.
Candidly, we use local. Some of us have adopted it at Whiteboard. I'm testing it out to see if I want to kind of make it a standardized tool that we use at Whiteboard.
That's great.
Because it's built on, this is just an aside, but it's built on really strong technology, things that we trust already, right? We know that containerization is a good thing, for example.
Yep,
right?
uses Docker.
It uses Docker, and so we can shift our version of PHP or we can shift our version of MySQL per install if we want to, and match, something that particular install needs. Which, in our previous setup, we had everybody set up a native install of Apache, and we didn't use MAMP because that caused a bunch of problems. So we all have native stuff set up on our machines, and that works very well as long as you always have the same version of PHP, and you always have the same version of Apache, and you always have the same version of MySQL on everybody's computer, and you also have all of those versions live, right? So, whatever server you're using needs to conform to your local, and your local conforms to the server, and your whole team conforms to those constraints. Well, that was causing problems, right? Because when we had a new team member come on, they're going to install the latest version. And so now they're ahead of us. They're ahead of the older team members. We had this weird situation where the longer you've been on the team, the more likely that your machine was going to have problems, right?
Yes.
And this helps mitigate this, right?
Yeah.
And now the setup process is, particularly this is for WordPress. The setup process is clicks, right? And I'm not trying to expand this beyond the real value. Like it is a very simple tool that does a very good job. So I appreciate the fact that Flywheel is giving this away.
Yeah.
So that's super cool.
It is really cool. I'm a developer, and I still do side gigs. I still have stuff that I work on.
Yeah.
I can't talk about the project that I'm launching, I think, soon, but it's WordPress, and I use local.
Yep.
And the experience of setting stuff up is significantly quicker.
Yeah.
It's great because at Flywheel, we talk about this so much. It's like in our DNA, which is great. We really want agencies and designers to have the simplest experience when working on their website. We care about their workflow.
Yeah.
We're not just a host, and we are a host, and we do very good work doing hosting, but we also really care about the experience of you working with designers and your client, and how you can move as fast as possible, doing the things that you absolutely love.
Yeah.
And local complements that in a ridiculously good way. Like, I want to code. I don't want to have to deal with what you're talking about, which are the system dependencies. When I had to use Vagrant would just shut off, which would be kind of frustrating.
And it felt like overkill. Always felt like overkill for me. So yeah, absolutely.
So we wrapped it up. Well, previously it was Pressmatic, bought it, and now we're going through some cool stuff. I'm really excited about it. I'm so excited about it. Oh man.
Most of the mobile applications that you build, or really anyone builds, have a lot of similar functions. They have a lot of similar needs, and they have a lot of similar boilerplate code that you end up writing over and over and over again. This is usually a waste of time, but unfortunately it's still necessary in most coding environments, most application development environments. And part of this is because application development environments haven't really changed for decades. Today's sponsor is helping change that landscape. Today's sponsor is Fuse. Fuse is a program that you install. It's a development environment program that you install on either Mac OS or on Windows, and it generates a lot of that code that you don't have to necessarily care about. You're going to be writing less code, but doing more with your product, focusing more on the application itself. This gives you time and energy to put towards things that matter more. Go and check it out, spec.fm/Fuse. Now, this all compiles down to native iOS and Android applications, so there's no performance concerns. Go and check it out. Once again, spec.fm/Fuse. Thank you again to Fuse for sponsoring today's episode of Developer Tea. I'm excited to learn more about how some of the internals of Local. There have been projects that I wanted to use it on. I would use it for Rails if I could, right? Like I would love to be able to manage containers through Local and be able to have that interface for those kinds of things as well. So maybe I'll have to send a couple of feedback tickets to
for
the
real. We
Flywheel
listen
team.
to them. I read them all the time.
I believe it. I believe it. So like I said, I wanted to shift gears. I got off on the tangent about Local, but you did this workshop yesterday.
Yeah.
And going into that kind of thing, I kind of want to discuss the experience of building content for a workshop, because I think a lot of developers are going to experience this regardless of where you do it. I don't think you have to be, planning to go and give a workshop at a conference necessarily. You probably will experience something like this in your workplace, right? Where you need to, whether you're a lead developer and you need to teach younger developers something, some part of your process, or something new, or maybe you were doing something in your local community and you want to teach developers in your local community. Whatever the purpose is, building this kind of content is going to be, teaching is a fundamental part of learning, right? So I'd love for you to kind of discuss what you're, leading into that, what your ideas were, because you talked about building an API and you used Node and Express, and just kind of leading into that, and then how things were different than you expected them to be, how they were the same, and then, kind of your takeaways.
Absolutely. So I got contacted by probably November or so, feels about right. Said, hey, do you want to do a workshop on APIs? I said, absolutely. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Sure.
In high school, I worked on my very first API, and I started consuming other APIs. So I knew what was happening. And so going into this, I was thinking I would be able to make an API, show the process of an API being created by, or at least one endpoint. Let's talk about what the product was. Let me back up a little bit.
That works.
So the API workshop was to do a social platform called RSpace. Very simple, just capital RSPACE, RSpace.
Yeah.
It's a social platform where you can post a story and you'll see a feed of all the stories. Dead simple.
Sure.
And then collaborative aspect of the workshop would be to create the likes feature.
Yep.
So this is what I was thinking I would do for the workshop. That I had really high naive hopes. I really hoped that this would work in this way.
Yeah.
And it does sound like a great idea, and I think it still can be executed. We'll talk. Yeah. So we'll hit on that in a minute. So I have a repo of the Express Node Express server that served the API. At the last minute, I added Postgres as a dependency for everybody.
Yeah.
That was a mistake. So we spent probably the first hour setting some of those things up. But then after that, everybody had the Node server working. You could go to localhost :/API/stories/1 or drop the 1 and you get all the stories. Which was great. Then what I wanted to do was focus on these are the endpoints. Here's how you work with them. Now, how can we make endpoints that, like tangential, how can we make those discoverable?
Sure.
Great example are the next page in a paginated list of stories. How can we get the next page? Well, you can add an options underneath. You can add an options array underneath the data array, which returns the stuff that the API you really kind of care about. And the options is just like a hint, like, hey, here's how you go to page 2. And it can cap out, and it can say, hey, there's no more pages, which is great. That can suggest that you don't have to keep querying for some reason or another.
Sure.
It also, what I wanted to do was explain what the options header was, because it was really, for me, learning APIs and design. I looked at Flickr, and they had really good documentation. And I learned that the options header, while they didn't really use the options header was intended for what does this API offer? What are the options I can use? I can act on. And so showed that. I don't think it really hit, which is okay. It was all right, because we also had the cognitive load of learning JavaScript.
Sure.
I think if I was going to redo this, I would get rid of the JavaScript dependency and just focus on the what makes a good API and how can we show that best. I think that there's some value in that. And then I'm trying to think what else. What were the latter two questions?
So I think, this kind of leads into just a discussion about it. I was in this discussion, and I sat back and took it in because I thought it was so interesting to watch. Because the variety of people in the room was the full spectrum. You had students who, and I'm going to call them students because it's kind of in this scenario. That's
it makes sense.
Students or customers or whatever, that they had, a certain level of knowledge that was right at the cusp of just under, and it was enough that they could keep up and learn a lot, right? So, and that's kind of what you want. You want as many people to be in that group as possible. And then you have people who are way to the left or way to the right of that as well. So people who had never, never set up a Node server, never seen an Express app, never seen ES6 template literals or whatever, literal strings or whatever they're called.
What are those backticks in my JavaScript?
Exactly,
what's going on?
Right. Yeah, I don't understand. And then even people who had never seen JavaScript, much less, And so I think walking into that, they had their preconceptions of what they were going to learn. In fact, everybody did, right? Everyone sees a title and they see an abstract of a workshop like this, and they have a preconceived notion of what they should walk away knowing.
Yes.
Right? And part of your job as the teacher is to anticipate some of those, but also some of it is to reveal some of those and get them to be bought into that, right? And it was it was like a study for me in sociology, because it was so interesting to see the different breakdowns of people when one person would jump in and try to, clarify.
Clarify.
Yeah. when they saw someone else struggling, right? There was this sense of tension in the room because you could tell that there was that disparity between the two ends of the spectrum. And it's very, so you were dealt a really difficult hand. I think I told you this yesterday, but it's one of the hardest jobs to fit that much of a content piece in 3 hours, right? 3 hours, it feels long. It felt like a long workshop, but ultimately, when you have that large of a gap to make up, you're basically teaching.
Take advantage of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're teaching 10 different workshops is the idea, right? So for one person, the workshop is, how do I get Node installed? For another person, the workshop is,
how do I use JavaScript?
Exactly.
What does that look like?
And then for the person who is caught up, it's the options header, right?
That's
something
actual
new.
Content.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it was very interesting. So, so to be completely clear, there was no way that you could have known what those people were going into that,
nope.
Right?
There was, and that's okay. This was like one of the best learning experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
It was a bummer, which is okay. Like
right.
that kind of stuff happens.
Sure.
That's all good. But it was really good because I can. I was even doing this in real time because I was like, how do I do this?
How do I adapt
and I was
this?
like on stage, like, okay, let's see.
Right. Yeah.
So it's great because I think something like this could be a great format for Treehouse, for example.
Yeah.
Where I could say, we're going to make an API and we're going to use Express. And at the end of that, then we'll say, here are the great things that you can do to make your API secure, discoverable, so that it complements whoever's consuming the API.
Yep.
And among other things, authentication. How do you handle that? How do you deal with tokens and stuff like that?
Right. Yeah.
Which we didn't get to.
Sure. Yeah. But we did end up getting to this, to the liking and the deletion of likes and things like that. And all that was extremely interesting. And again, as being one of the people in the room who had worked with JavaScript, it, to me, was very transparent, right? The JavaScript part of it was. I think for other people, that's where it became opaque, which, again, this is a learning experience in teaching, because having a very clear picture of who you are teaching and what they already know and what their goals are and what they're going to get at the end of it.
What they intend to take away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is very difficult. It's, with a podcast, it's the same thing. My job is to understand the people listening to this podcast, what their ultimate goals are, and how to create content that is going to be helpful to them, without leaving a large portion in the dust. And it was very interesting, actually. I had a discussion with another person. I can't remember who it was, but they were also in the API workshop with us, and they mentioned this idea that like there are certain like philosophies, not to get too deep on the subject, but certain philosophies about the social economics of it. So, for example, you have one person in the class that takes 5 times as long to get set up. Let's say, just this isn't true, but one person in the class that's kind of dragging the rest of the class down. Is it more correct to allow that person to fall back and continue forward?
I don't think
forward?
so. I think
difficult.
It's difficult,
right?
Yeah.
But go ahead. I didn't mean that.
No, there were a couple individuals in the class who were struggling, and that's more than understandable.
Right.
My gut, the way that I'm wired is, no, I want you to be on the same page. I want you to experience this because I want all of us to have fun together. I want all of us to see this happen. And so it was a 3-hour workshop, for example. But so I don't want to interrupt too much because you're on a really great track. Talking about teaching. So do you want to take it back up?
Sure. Yeah. So essentially saying that there are some, utility models, for example, of teaching that you have people in the room who could go very far, right? And then you have people, and this is a lot of discussion around things like Common Core in the United States, and they center around these same kinds of topics. Is how do you help maximize the overachievers and help assist the underachievers, right? And just statistically, where do you draw the lines, and how can you create the right boundaries for those people, and how do you tell someone, hey, maybe this workshop isn't going to go super well for you, right?
Yeah.
Because we discussed this.
In retrospect, that would have been helpful to be able to say, I think that the line that we're talking to could be solved with a word, which is, this is an intermediate.
Sure. Yeah. It's like a prerequisite, right?
Yeah.
You might want to know these things.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then you may feel behind.
Yeah.
But everything is 2020 in hindsight.
Yeah,
right?
it really
is.
is.
It's
Yeah,
really
for
difficult.
Sure.
But I enjoyed it very much because
that makes me glad.
Because the learning experience was great. I thought the content was fantastic, and that given another hour, we would have gotten something really good.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I look forward to future iterations of it and seeing where you go with it.
Definitely. Me too. Yeah. I also appreciated it because everybody was real. They were honest. And it was great that they were so human and okay with watching me fail.
Sure.
That was cool.
It didn't feel like a failure from the audience perspective, though.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yes,
I hope so.
Sure, yeah.
But I think that the way that it was done, I tried to handle it in, the most considerate way possible.
Right.
I think it was, I tried to present myself as I was there for them to help them.
Yep.
And even if this workshop ends at 5, we can still chat.
Sure.
That's way okay.
Yeah.
It's totally cool.
And that's what teaching is about. It's really about finding a way to help someone and enable them. I talk about this stuff a lot on the show, even though this is a developer show. So many people are going to experience the need to be able to teach, right? Even the desire to be able to teach, the opportunity to teach. And I'm so convinced that teaching is such an essential part of what we do in this job, because this is a knowledge industry, right? So everything that we do is going to rely on the transfer and the multiplication of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
The sharing of knowledge.
How can that stuff propagate faster as accurately as possible?
Right.
That's interesting.
And for someone who has knowledge, if they can find a way to teach it,
to get it out
effectively, that's going to increase the overall capacity of the industry. Right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's not just a good-hearted thing to teach someone. It is actually a business
kind of
value.
important. Yeah.
Exactly. So
this is funny. I learned to code from a person who left a big corporate job, who's one of the best communicators I think I've ever met.
Wow.
He decided to join and go to a public school to teach code and math.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So he was there for, I think, probably 3 years or so.
Yeah.
But him teaching me that was interesting because he was considerate when people were struggling and trying.
Yeah.
And that kind of perspective, like, I hope I try. Like to
embody that.
Yeah, it really helps.
Yeah.
It really helps.
So
Other
some takeaways on this.
Takeaways, yeah.
Kind of some homework takeaways, I think, for people listening to the show is modify your perception of yourself just as an exercise. Take a few minutes and add teacher to your list of responsibilities. Think about who can you teach? Like who are the people around you that you can teach? Sometimes I have this energy to teach and I have no one around me but my wife. And so I'll be like, can I just show you this thing? And it really is kind of almost a mental release for me to be able to explain something to another person. It helps me learn more completely. But this homework assignment is to give people the expansion of their mind to say, you're not only an executor, right? Or an executive person. You're not only producing, you also could teach. Now, imagine who could you teach? I think that's an extremely useful opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
So I have two questions I like to ask all the guests that come on the show, and I'm going to ask you these two questions now. The first question is, what do you wish more people would ask you about? What topic? It doesn't have to be development. It can be anything.
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's a great question. And I don't know, really. What I want more people to ask me about is probably what let me think.
This is always a hard question, by the way.
Yeah.
So,
how do other people answer this?
some people talk about their hobbies. Some people talk about the one value that they find really important. Some people make it very narrow and they say, I wish more people would ask me about how to create better passwords.
I kind of think that I wish more people would ask the kind of simple, mundane, very, very day-to-day questions like, how was your day?
Yeah.
I like those questions because that is the entry point to talk about attention.
Yeah.
And then resolve it.
Huh. Yeah.
It's a really simple question too.
Right.
And it also literally shows that you care about that person's day. Actually, I kind of wish, more often, more people would ask, how's your day?
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
And be willing to hear something other than it's fine.
Oh, yeah.
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 Right.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not just a I think a lot of people end up in that scenario where you ask this question more as a courtesy but
ask it with intent. And
it's not small talk.
Yeah.
It's you're asking someone about the most important thing, their time, right?
Yeah.
So take it seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good. So
hi.
if you see Will at a conference, or if you visit Flywheel or something,
totally.
then
we're in Omaha. Super
ask
friendly.
him about his day.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How was your day?
Yeah,
I love it.
How's it going? The second question I like to ask all the guests that come on the show is, if you had 30 seconds of advice to give to all developers, which is a very broad group.
Wowza.
But,
yeah.
beginners and experienced alike, what would you tell them?
Take some time to value design. It's hard and you never are good at it. I can say that for dang sure. And I've worked at design companies for a while now. And take some time to value design. Look at what it means. And then also take some time to explore psychology. It's fun.
Yeah.
And don't be an empath, like deeply empathetic, but be very empathetic to the people around you and understand the struggles that they're going through. Oh, and also vote. Please.
That's good. That's good. Cool. Well, Will, thank you so much for coming on the show and offering your, tons of information and very good conversation about all the things we talked about. Thank you very much.
And thank you for being an amazing host. And also, is it Spec or is it a longer name? Spec FM?
Spec is right. Yeah, Spec FM.
I love every podcast that you guys do. I'm a sucker for Does Not Compute.
Nice.
I'm a sucker for Design Details.
Very cool.
My buddy Nick Ciccinelli, he's here.
Huge fan.
You guys do great stuff.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Developer Tea, and thank you to Will Riley for joining me on the show, stopping by and talking to me at Squares. I really enjoyed my interview with Will. I'm sure you all did as well. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you again to today's sponsor, Fuse. If you have been developing apps for any longer than a year or two, then you know that the development environment hasn't changed very much, but that's what Fuse is doing. They're changing that so that you can write a little bit less code and instead focus a little bit more on the product. Go and check it out, spec.fm/Fuse. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Developer Tea. If you don't want to miss out on future episodes and future awesome interviews with people like Will, go ahead and subscribe in whatever podcasting app you use. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, enjoy your tea.